Well, hey y'all, I'm Patrick Murtis. I am the Executive Director of the Diabetes Family Connection, and we are joined today by one of our favorite volunteers, Kayla Mirtsching. Kayla is not only living with type 1 diabetes, but she is also a nurse, and she tested positive for coronavirus and has since recovered. Can I say that accurately, Kayla?
Yes, I have recovered.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Kayla, there's a lot of information that is out available on the internet now regarding COVID-19 and specifically kind of involving diabetes, but some of that information is fairly vague if they're talking about type 1 diabetes versus type 2 diabetes. So we very much appreciate you being on this call today and kind of
Thank you. I
giving a
appreciate you doing it.
first-hand perspective of what it's like kind of navigating this thing. So I know a lot of people watching this are probably familiar with who you are, but I would argue that there's going to be a number of people that are watching this that might not know you as well. So if we could just kind of just jump right into it, if you want to introduce yourself, talk about kind of where you're from, what you do professionally, how long you've been living with diabetes, if you just want to kick it off.
All right. My name is Kayla. I have been living with diabetes for 31 years now. I volunteer at Camp Morris, one of my favorite things to do every year. I am a nurse here in Hickory, North Carolina.
So, Kayla, because I do feel like it's relevant to the conversation, would you mind telling folks how old you are?
I'm 32 years old.
32. Okay. And if we can kind of take this whole thing back to the infancy of your experience with COVID-19, can you kind of talk about maybe your early symptoms and what prompted you to actually get tested?
Yes. So my husband and I, we had recently been traveling. We went on a cruise. We were actually one of the last cruises to be able to leave port before they stopped all the cruises. We got back on a Monday, and my symptoms started Sunday. It started with a cough. I didn't really think much of it, because pollen is really high right now, or at that time in our area. And my husband and I, we had went to a restaurant that, we hadn't really ate at before. And so the next morning I woke up about 5 a.m. with some digestive issues, and I felt cold, but I don't normally run a fever when I'm sick, but I went ahead and took my fever or my temperature since we had recently traveled, and it was 99.9. Didn't think much of it. I went back to bed thinking that I would just sleep it off and wake up, and I would feel better. And so, since, I hadn't returned back to work yet, I slept in. I did sleep till about 11 o'clock, and I woke up still feeling a little chilled. So I took my temperature again. I was 100.4. I went, went ahead and took some Tylenol, and a couple hours later rechecked. I was 98.8, didn't think nothing of it. Well, about 5 o'clock that afternoon is when things really started kicking off. I started, getting achy. I felt feverish, still had the cough, and at my husband's urging, because, being a nurse, I'm a little stubborn and didn't want to go to get checked because, I honestly thought I had the flu. But again, he urged me to go to urgent care. So I did. When I got to urgent care, the doctor, he was really concerned. He said, I didn't really look good. I was really sweaty, still chilled, still achy. My fever at urgent care was 101.7. So it had went up again. They gave me some Tylenol. He wanted to do a chest x-ray and wanted to swab me for the flu. So my flu swab, it came back negative, but my chest x-ray did show some consolidation in the right lobe. So he, was concerned for pneumonia. So he told me, with my history of recent travel and my symptoms being consistent with COVID-19, he wanted to go ahead and swab me. So that was really concerning when that happened.
Okay. And then obviously the test results don't come back immediately. So.
No, it took 12 days. Testing initially, when all of this started, was taking quite a long time, and my test results took 12 days to come back.
12 days. Okay. So did they basically kind of move forward as though that you did have coronavirus at that time?
He felt like it was highly likely that I had coronavirus. So they did, here in our county, we had to sign a waiver saying that we agreed to quarantine for 14 days and that we would limit our exposure to other people. And so I did have to sign that waiver, just to make sure everything was okay.
Okay. So you leave urgent care, and then how did your symptoms kind of progress over the next, several days?
So The fever was very persistent. For almost 7 days, I had a fever every 4 to 6 hours, and I was taking Tylenol really consistently. The body aches, they got worse, and the body aches were really in line with my fever. I could tell when after I would take my Tylenol and my fever would start going down, if I would start getting achy again, I knew my fever was coming back. And sure enough, I would take my temperature, and my temperature usually ran around 101 through COVID. I never had any of the extreme fevers that I've heard reported. Let's see, I had a really, really severe sore throat, but that didn't come initially. That come about 3 days into it. And that sore throat lasted for several days. The sense of losing the sense of smell and the sense of taste, that is real. My husband, he's super, super sweet, and he, cooked for me the whole time I was sick. He took such good care of me, but I felt so bad because I couldn't taste anything. Nothing tasted right at all. So luckily, some of the taste has coming back. My smell it's still messed up.
Wow. So in comparison to other illnesses that you've experienced before, how would you was it in the same ballpark? Was it close to anything you've experienced before?
I've had the flu a couple times since working as a nurse, and I can say without a doubt it was worse than any flu that I've ever had.
Wow. Okay.
I was just miserable. I was able to manage at home. Luckily, I never had to go be admitted to the hospital. But it's by far the sickest I've ever been.
Was there a certain criteria in conversations with your healthcare team that would prompt you to admit yourself to the hospital? Was there something like a threshold they were particularly looking for?
So the physician I saw at urgent care, he didn't particularly give me guidelines. This particular doctor knows me personally, and he knows me well. He knows that I'm well managed, with my diabetes care, and he knows that I know what to look for. But particularly my guidelines, I was trying to stay hydrated. I kept a bottle of water beside me at all times to make sure, that I stayed hydrated. If my fever, like I said, my fever never got over 101, but I had decided when it started climbing, that's when I felt like I would need to go ahead and go in. And then, of course, with the chest pain and shortness of breath, the most that ever bothered me was when I got up, to go to the bathroom, take a shower, anything like that. But I had decided, if my shortness of breath or my chest pain had got worse, I was going.
Sure. So you did have a lot of the kind of classic symptoms that you read about in terms of coronavirus.
I did.
Can you talk about how this impacted your diabetes management from kind of your typical day-to-day life?
Yeah, so I'm going to throw a huge shout out to Tandem and their Control IQ. I had just updated to Control IQ right before we went on our vacation. And I will say my blood sugars were high, and they stayed pretty high for me. Honestly, I think if it hadn't been for Control IQ and, that component of it, my blood sugar would have stayed higher. I kind of ranged between 220 and 250 about the whole time that I was sick. And it was really hard, to get my blood sugars to come down.
Okay. Wow. And can you tell a little bit about, you kind of alluded to it, but your living situation and what that looked like in terms of how you self-quarantined and just on that a little bit.
So my husband and I, we don't have children, so it's just us and our 2 pups. Luckily, we had went to the grocery store a couple days before all this started for us. So we were pretty well prepared. We were prepared to quarantine just in general, to stay, as if, what the CDC and the WHO have recommended. But when it became real for us and we truly had to quarantine and could not go around anybody for 14 days, that was hard. We talked on the phone with our parents every day. My mom checked on us and made sure we were okay. But now if there were supplies and stuff we needed, of course, I couldn't go to the pharmacy to get my medicine. So my mother-in-law, she went for me. She picked up my prescriptions, and they would literally put whatever we needed, whether it was milk or, whatever, they would put it on the porch and they would run back to their car. And then after they left, we would go back on the porch and we would get the stuff.
Do you think your husband contracted coronavirus? Was he tested for it?
A lot of people have asked this. He was never tested for it, but he did have some very similar symptoms to me. He never ran the high fevers. He never had the body aches, the chills like I did, but he did have a headache. He had a few days where he just said he didn't feel quite right, and then he had a cough like me, but all of his stuff, resolved before mine did. But being that we live in the house together, and he didn't really stay away from me, I'm pretty sure he had it.
Okay, interesting. So how are you now? How long did it kind of take for you to start feeling normal again? Are there lasting
I'm good now.
effects?
I'm good now. So the whole thing for me lasted about 9 days. Probably around day 7 is when I really started feeling better. But then I had, that day of feeling good, and then the next day I had kind of like a little relapse. I started feeling sick again. My fever did spike again after I had been fever-free for about 2 days. But again, just went back to taking Tylenol, staying hydrated. And again, on by day 9, it was just gone. And I felt normal.
Now, obviously, as a nurse, you're on the front lines. You're qualified as an essential worker. What were some of the things that your local health department was looking for before you were able to kind of return to the workforce? I'm assuming that you are working again at this point.
I am. So the local health department required that it had been at least 7 days since my symptom onset, and that I had been fever-free for 72 hours. And I had met all that criteria by the time I got my results. So they told me, as long as I, didn't have any symptoms. Of course, I had my cough. That lasted for several weeks. But that's pretty consistent with pneumonia anyway. So they told me as long as I hadn't had a fever and any of my other symptoms, that I was free to go back to my usual activities.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything you wish you would have known ahead of time for viewers that might be watching this that are kind of fearful of the coronavirus or contracting coronavirus?
Known ahead of time. I guess being a healthcare provider, I don't feel like there's anything in particular I wish I would have known. I will say I'm just glad that, my husband and I had already kind of prepared for a quarantine. I'm very, very glad that I have a supportive husband. I will say, my husband, oh my gosh, he was my rock during this. If it weren't for him, I honestly don't know what I would have done. He made me get up out of bed every morning. He made me come sit in the living room. He wouldn't let me just lay in the bed. He made me get up and shower every day. Again, on day 7, when I was feeling better, he made me get out and go walk outside. And I really think the moving and just staying motivated is part of what got me through this.
Awesome. And are there any kind of big learnings or takeaways that you'd like to share with the community now that you've kind of weathered coronavirus?
Oh, yes. There's a lot of information out there, and it's hard to dig through the weeds and to get accurate and reliable information. So my takeaway, and part of the reason I really wanted to get my story out there, is so people know if you do contract COVID-19, it doesn't automatically mean, that you are going to have a negative outcome or that you are going to die. I was very scared with this whole experience, but, I had an awesome support system. A lot of people out there checking on me every day that loved me. And, again, if you do get COVID, just stay calm, and it does not mean that something bad is going to happen to you.
Kayla, we are so relieved to hear that you are on the mend and doing well and have weathered this thing. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you carving out the time and just offering some firsthand perspective on what it's actually like and kind of cutting through some of the noise that's out there on the internet right now. We really do appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.